Hello and a very warm good morning. You're watching News9. I'm Shweta Kothari. We're bringing you stories from the world of business policy and economy. Let's begin with markets. It's the straight first day after G20 Summit here in the national capital. Markets have reacted very, very positively in the green. Both Sensex, Nifty, half a percent up almost.
Yes, Shweta. So Indian markets have extended their winning run to almost 7 sessions now. And we are coming off one of the best weeks for the Indian markets in almost 6 weeks, where Nifty and Sensex surged over 2%. And this was despite, Shweta, the dollar index surging past the 105 mark, the Brent crude price exceeding the $90 a barrel mark, the 10-year bond yields surpassing the 4.3%. So Indian markets, despite all of that, were pretty resilient and outperformed major global economies as well. And as a result, both Nifty and Sensex were up about 2%. Even in today's trade, we can see Nifty and Sensex were both almost up 0.5%. Nifty at 9:40 in the morning was trading above the 19,900 mark. So just 90 points shy of the previous peak of 19,991. Now Sensex has also scaled the 66,800 mark, and Nifty mid cap and Nifty small cap 100, Shweta, are continuing their outperformance. They have outperformed both benchmarks for the past 7 or 8 weeks straight. And in today's morning trade, Nifty mid cap 100 is up about 0.6%, whereas small cap index is up more than 1%.
All right, Suyash, let's also quickly get in Gaurang Shah, Senior VP, Geojit Financial Services, joining us on the show. Good morning, sir. Good to have you back. Both Sensex, Nifty again at an all-time high. Nifty touching the 20,000 mark there, just shy of 80 points at this point.
Good morning, Shweta, to all of you all, and thank you for having me on the show. So I think we were in conversation last week on Tuesday, and our view on the markets was absolutely clear that once we take out 19,600 on the Nifty spot decisively, I think the move towards 19,991 will be sooner rather than later. And a crossover of that and making an all-time new high is also a reality. And I think it's surprising to see the kind of speed of the market. And it was only because of that long consolidation, Shweta, that we saw in the month of August, almost a month, maybe a little bit more. We spent in that range of 19,200, 300 on the lower side, 19,500, 19,600 on the higher side. And I think as a result of that long consolidation, we are where we are. And I absolutely don't see any kind of hesitation in saying that the all-time high crossover is a reality, and possibly a new all-time high is also a reality. So this momentum will continue only because we've rallied for the last entire week. Maybe there might be a little bit of pause in terms of profit booking, but I think we'll see a new all-time high sooner rather than later.
All right. And what are you attributing this to? Very strong domestic cues, globally not so strong if you look at crude prices. What are you attributing the bull run to?
Well, so I think it was month of July was a stellar month. We saw almost 1,000-point rally on the Nifty. At the end of June, we were at 19,000. I think by July, we saw an all-time high of 19,991.85. Then entire month of consolidation. And I think this is typical of the market, Shweta. And given the fact that we have crossed over this levels, possibly momentum in terms of earnings visibility, confidence about government policies, G20 meet, I think that's a major game changer, the way India has risen to the kind of level it has and the kind of confidence that the other leaders of the country are exhibiting towards India. Favorable environment. Crude oil, we are quite comfortable, Shweta, though Brent is at $90 a barrel. NYMEX at about $86, $87 a barrel. But I think our comfort zone with Russia and Iran is a more kind of an optimistic kind of view. Rupee, which has crossed over to 83, has kind of gained some strength against the dollar. So not worried too much about the crude oil impact because we have a comfort zone over there with Russia and Iran. And I think government policy is definitely something that has rebuilt the confidence into the market, and that's the reason why we are.
Hi, Gaurang.
Sorry, Suyash. Before I let Suyash come in, I mean, we are just shy, as I said, of 20,000 mark, and we had an epiphany here, I think a week ago, Suyash, on the show.
Yes, yes. So we are just shy of the 20,000 mark, about 100 points below the 20,000 mark. We have scaled the 19,900 mark again. Now, the first target, as Gaurang also mentioned, will be the previous all-time high of 19,991.
Okay.
From there, the buying interest depends where it goes. So, Gaurang, I just wanted to get your view on rupee. Now, Indian markets are certainly doing well, but rupee has been under pressure, and in fact, it has fallen to, it is currently trading near its all-time low levels. What's the overhang?
So I think it's not only the rupee, Shreyas, that is weak against the dollar. I think all the currencies, if you go to see, even you take euro for instance, you take any other emerging market currency, that has gained a little bit of weakness against the dollar, and dollar is stronger against all those currencies. So it is universal strength in the dollar that is kind of exhibiting the weakness in the rest of the currencies. But mind you, Shreyas, Indian government is working towards rupee-dominated trade with almost about 18 to 20 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And with this G20, I think that momentum of dominance of dollar is going to come down to a great extent. Local currency dominated trade across the countries, across the borders is something that we'll have to be excitingly waiting for, because the kind of dominance that has been there of dollar, I think that should go away or abate a little bit. I think statements or commentary from the RBI going forward will bring in a little bit of more strength and sentiments on the positive side as far as rupee is concerned. So I would not say that only rupee is weak against the dollar. I would say that dollar is strength against major currencies, Shreyas. I think if you look at from that point of view, I don't think you will have anything to complain about. And the fact is that we have gained some strength on the rupee this morning. It is trading at about 82.85 against the dollar, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, and since we are talking about G20 and the aftermath or after impact rather of G20, and a lot of positive news of course came in by the way of stocks that could be impacted. Let me quickly hand over to my colleague Suyash here. Suyash, we are focusing of course on stocks that are likely to be impacted. Let's begin with Adani Group first.
Yes, Shweta, certainly. So Adani Group's Singapore subsidiary has entered a 50-50 joint venture with Singapore-based Kowa Holdings. Now, the agreement is for the sales and marketing of green ammonia, hydrogen, and its derivative products, which are supplied by the Adani Group. Now, there'll be a host of other green energy stocks that will benefit, such as the likes of GAIL, NTPC, and JSW Neo. Apart from that, RIL is another stock which will be in focus after the G20 Summit. Now, the news is that RIL has entered a partnership with US-based chipmaker NVIDIA to develop India's own large language model, which will be trained on regional languages and which will be tailored for generative AI models. Now, NVIDIA will provide Reliance Jio Infocom with access to its most advanced supercomputing service on the cloud to build AI applications for nearly 450 million users. Another stock which will benefit is Tata Communications. Now, the news is that Tata Communications is also collaborating with NVIDIA, and it is also going to benefit from its AI cloud model, and it will also benefit from the high data speed transfer for the enterprises.
All right. Gaurang, both Tata Communications as well as RIL stock up by 2.3%, 0.43% respectively this morning.
Well, I think so. First, a disclosure, Shweta, we have a positive buy coverage on both of them, Reliance Industries as well as Tata Communication. And I think communication, the evolvement of or the evolving technology and the next level of communication is something that the government has been focusing for a pretty long period of time. I think from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, 5G, and now we're talking about a next level of communication. So I think that's going to, and more importantly, Shweta, the government is extremely focused about connecting semi-urban and rural India with the rest of the country. So my sense is that this evolving technology and policies towards enabling communication at the next level will possibly have a huge positive impact, not only on the companies which are providing those kind of platforms, but also towards the companies which will have the ability to make equipments of those levels. And of course, as far as RL is concerned, Shweta, post the AGM, I think there is tremendous amount of focus. I mean, there was a little bit of concern as far as Geo Financial Services concerned, then the price discovery, then the listing of that particular arm, concerns with respect to whether the new age businesses that Reliance is stepping into, whether it will, create value. But we are extremely sure and confident about that. So we remain positive on both these stocks.
All right, and since we're talking about Reliance, I must also ask you about Geo Financial Services. What's the latest there? We hear that there is a deal by the virtue of which US could be looking at partnerships with Geo, and perhaps Geo would be replacing, and we're not talking about Geo Financial Services, I'm talking about Geo's telecom arm here, could be replacing Huawei.
Yeah, so I think, there was a big question mark as far as India's capability and capacity is concerned. I remember there used to be a good old saying that, some time back, that India is the land of snakes and snake charmers and monkeys. But I think look at the level that we have reached over a period of time. So absolutely no doubt in terms of, the kind of leadership that India can have going forward from here on. Geo Financial Services, Shweta, as of now, I will not comment too much in terms of buy, sell or hold, but there are a lot of small pieces which are flying in the air, which needs to possibly come down and give us a clear picture in terms of numbers. And that may take a little bit of while. Of course, the kind of parent backing that Geo Financial Services have, the war chest of cash that they have, the kind of technology, the kind of database, the kind of reach, the kind of networking, you ask and they have it. But unfortunately, for a person like me who looks at the fundamental more clearly, that visibility will come over a period of time, and getting approvals from the regulators, getting started at ground level, I think that's a little bit far away from where we are right now. So though the roadmap is absolutely clear, and quite confident about Geo Financial Services delivering on those promises, but as of now, there is nothing that I can actually speak in terms of numbers.
All right, but are we looking at a timeline? And I know you said that there's going to be time taken to get regulatory approvals, but are we looking at a fixed timeline here, perhaps next 6 to 8 months?
I would give it a year, Shweta, and okay. Of course, BlackRock is also there, if I'm not mistaken. They want to go into mutual fund AMC. They want to go into insurance business.
So, an AMC business by the end of the year is your expectation?
I hope so. I'll be optimistic.
All right, and we're all optimistic. But another stock that we're tracking here is JSW. JSW up almost 4%. So yes, this morning.
Yes, Shweta. So this morning the news came out that private equity investor TGP, TEPCO, which is Tokyo Electric Power Company, and Brookfield are in advanced talk with the company to buy a minority stake in the JSW Neo Energy arm. Now, the subsidiary of the JSW Energy is looking to enter into agreements with two of these companies. And the idea and what I'm reading is that JSW Group is looking to raise about $500 million from the stake sale. So this could be a big benefit for the boost for the stock, and as a result, we are seeing a price movement in the stock, and it's up about 4% this morning.
All right, and not just JSW, by the way of G20 and what's come out in the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, a lot of green energy stocks will be in focus today, Gaurang. A lot of positive development there as far as the new International Biofuel Alliance is concerned. Also is, sustainable alternative to crude, new furthering commitment, strengthening perhaps India's commitment and the commitment of G20 towards a more sustainable future. All of that could have an impact on the green energy stocks. Are you tracking some of them this morning?
Well, so I think all your oil marketing companies will be in focus, BPCL, HPCL, IOCL, and they have also mentioned about getting into green energy, and they have already put a roadmap in place in terms of investments, Shweta, in green energy, green hydrogen, to be more precise. Reliance Industries have spoken about it. L&T has spoken about it. If I have to look at some equipment manufacturing companies with this focus and leadership, definitely India will take, giving it, Asia Pacific emerging market and a capability of a sound leadership along with the democracy in place. So possibly we may outshine China as far as comparability is concerned. If I have to look at equipment manufacturing companies in this particular, and of course reducing, carbon footprint is something that the Honorable Prime Minister has already spoken about. So I think along with your RIL and L&Ts and the oil marketing companies, Engineers India would be the other company. It's a 51% government-owned entity. My sense is that somewhere close to about 150 or 160. The last time I saw it was trading at Engineers India. This also could be a good investment idea.
Gaurang, just wanted to get your view on L&T. Now, L&T touched a record high, I think, on Friday, and it also bagged a 24, or at least there are talks that it is likely to bag a deal with Saudi Aramco worth 24,000 crore rupees. Now, what's your outlook on the stock?
I think this is one of the, according to me, Shreyash, this is one of the most investor-friendly companies. I've been tracking this company for the last almost about, I think, 15, 20 years or maybe more. Every 3 years or so, the company comes out with 1:1 or 1:2 bonus or 2:1 bonus or whatever be it. After the price getting adjusted for bonus, 1 year, 1.5 year, the X bonus price again becomes the come bonus price. So just imagine the kind of value an investor creates by investing into L&T. Along with that, on the earnings front, I think with the kind of order book they have, diversified order book, and each and every vertical shares is contributing to the balance sheet of L&T. Be it complex turnkey project, be it hydrocarbon, be it infrastructure, be it defense, because L&T is a big player as far as servicing to the Indian Navy is concerned, and they've got a decent amount of orders as well. And of course, now with this green energy focus that the government is putting in, I think 2,900 is just a number. If you ask me, this stock can go to multiple higher levels from here on. Again, as a disclosure, we do have a positive coverage on L&T.
All right, since we are talking about G20 stocks in focus, I also have to briefly mention infrastructure stocks are going to be in focus by the way of a mega corridor, an economic corridor that is likely to be developed in perhaps some years to come from now. We don't know a timeline on that, but a memorandum that was signed on the sidelines of G20, could that have an impact on infra stocks? Are there any particular stocks that we should be tracking today, Gaurang?
Well, so Shweta, I think those are a little bit away, all those connecting international borders by road. That will take a while. But in India itself, look at the kind of, be it Bharatmala Pariyojana, be it Sagarmala Pariyojana, be it dedicated freight corridors, freight quadrangles, connectivity, expressways, highways. There is huge opportunity. And I'll put one thing very simple, Shweta, that if we are thinking about growing from 6.5% GDP to 7.5, and maybe, a number that our late finance minister spoke about was 9.5 to 10% GDP growth rate for India. I think it's going to be very, very important to create new infrastructure, modernize the existing one, and get connected. So we, in the infrastructure universe, we like, L&T is also a play, Shweta, into infrastructure. Along that KNR constructions, PNC.
All right, Gaurang, sorry, I'll have to cut you short. We are getting visuals of Mohammed bin Salman meeting or going there to meet Prime Minister Modi. Let's play up those visuals. All right, there, Prime Minister Modi receiving the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Remember, he's on a state visit to India up until today. We have inked some very special economic partnerships with Saudi Arabia, in fact with the entire Middle East for that matter, and I want to quickly also touch upon that economic corridor we talked about in just a while from now, but visuals there coming in from the national capital this morning. All right, talking about the partnerships that we have with Saudi Arabia and what's likely to come in by the way of an economic corridor, let me quickly get in my colleague Karthik Malhotra, who will be joining us very, very shortly, on what it means to have an economic corridor connecting India, Middle East and Europe, and why is it so significant, so important and so huge, Karthik? An alternate Silk Route is what many people are calling it.
Hi, good morning, Shweta, Suyash. Hi, Gaurang. Thanks for joining us this morning. No doubt, Shweta, I mean, this is pretty much the new spice route, not really the Silk Route. The Silk Route is China's Belt and Road Initiative. That's the new Silk Road. I think what India is trying to do with the Middle East right now, what India is trying to do by way of this I2U2 coming together, which is India, Israel, UAE and US, and add to that the larger Middle East bucket, which also includes Saudi Arabia. And that is why these visuals are very important right now. That we are actually, in a sense, trying to create an alternate supply chain, an alternate trade line by way of roads, by way of railways, by way of hydrogen pipes, and by way of data connectivity. Where this corridor is actually going to have two fangs. One is going to be the Eastern Corridor and one is going to be the Northern Corridor. The Eastern Corridor connects the Middle East to India, and the Northern Corridor now connects the Middle East to Europe. I mean, this of course is a long-term plan, and let these visuals play out, lovely visuals coming there, and we'll get into, a nice explanation of what this new corridor could look like. But, if I can get Gaurang back in this discussion while these visuals continue to play. Gaurang, what does this really, entail as far as trade between the Western Bloc, the Middle East and India is concerned? And I believe this is not something which is likely to take off, very
anytime
soon. It's a large infrastructure, massive infrastructure project actually. So no timeline per se has been arrived at yet. But in your experience, what we are looking at, a 20-year window, or could this be shorter than that?
Karthik, thank you and morning to you as well. So that's what I was just discussing with Shweta a while back. This is, good part about all this is it creates opportunity and equal opportunity for all. Gone are the days of dominance that the developed country had. And more so, Karthik, with the kind of natural reserves that lies in this part of the world, especially in the Middle East. Our sense is that it's at least good to see a humble beginning taking place. It will take a while because we'll need consensus from all these stakeholders which are involved in this. So maybe possibly, sooner rather than later, I would say, but maybe 10, 15 years cannot be ruled out. But possibly it might be put to fast track, given the kind of focus and dominance that India has to play, and along with that, the policies that the Honorable Prime Minister is having in his mind.
And does it augur well at in the times that we live in, Gaurang, where China's Belt and Road Initiative has already seen investments over $1 trillion, and yesterday we saw that perhaps Italy is pulling out of that Belt and Road Initiative with China. So in that context, I'm not talking geopolitics here, I'm actually talking geoeconomics. So in that standpoint, do you see closer trade ties between Europe and India developing by way of the the supply chain economies that one could get with a corridor of this nature?
Honestly, Karthik, how much of do we believe in that comes out from China in terms of news flows? I honestly have my own reservations. I will take it with a bag full of salt, not with a pinch of salt, whatever comes out from China. And they are doing their bit after what they have gifted to the world, the Wuhan virus. I think they need to do a little bit better than that. But I don't think there's going to be any comparison. And the entire project, as far as China is concerned, it was all, from the time it started, it had very weak pillars on which it stood. And with Pakistan being a partner, you can very well imagine where the things are going to go. So I don't think that's going to create any kind of threat. And I think we should focus on our geographies over here, with Middle East and Europe being an integral part of that particular trade.
Right. Talk to us specifically about Saudi Arabia and our trade deals with Saudi Arabia. We have these live visuals playing of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. I think he's here on a state visit. We are made to understand, Gaurang, that certain MOUs have been signed. We don't know what those MOUs and the details of those MOUs or the value of those MOUs as yet. But there are MOUs which have been signed, and oil obviously seems to be the most likely deal that we could strike further, with Saudi Arabia and the whole Middle East region. Is there something else between Saudi Arabia and India that could move the markets today?
Well, so I think, oil is going to be something that is going to be a history as we go forward from here on. And I think the primary, and of course, in terms of the Crown Prince, MBS, he has already changed a lot of, policies in Saudi Arabia. They have opened up their borders. They have made some crucial changes in their policies, and opportunity in terms of a role that India has to play. So India is connected very closely with the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia. And the number of expats that we have over there, the number speaks for itself, and the kind of contribution that the Indians are doing over there. So I think there will be much more to it than what we anticipate. So let's hope possibly by end of day or maybe tomorrow we'll have clarity in terms of what the bilateral trades are.
All right, Gaurang, thanks very much. I think we've stretched you here a little bit, but thank you very much for taking time out. We hope to get you back very, very soon. But keeping up with markets, Suyash, let's also quickly tell our viewers major events to look out for this week.
Certainly, Shweta. So first, tomorrow we have the CPI numbers coming out. Now, India's headline inflation is expected to subside a little. In July, it was about 7.44%. From what I am reading, analysts are expecting a print of about 7%. Now, this will be an important data point to track, because this will also give us some insight as to RBI's interest rate trajectory. Okay. Also, the next day, September 13, we will see US CPI inflation numbers coming out. So that will also be keenly eyed, because FOMC meet ends on September 20th. And at least the expectation as of now, 93% of the analysts, as per the Reuters poll, expect FOMC to not hike interest rates in this. But if you look at the November's expectation, about 50% only expect a pause. So clarity will be we'll seek some clarity over there, and it will majorly depend upon the inflation print. Also on September 14, we will have WPI inflation numbers coming out, and the following day, balance of trade and import and export data will also be. All right,
a very significant week there to look out for. More concerning, or perhaps more relevant, would be the headline inflation numbers. Wholesale inflation still under control. It's the pulses, vegetable inflation, which has been problematic, which has been a bone of contention, keeping perhaps a lot of people up and about.
Definitely. So if you look at the core inflation on a month-on-month basis has subsided from May to July, but the problem remains is that fuel and energy prices and food prices. Now, food and energy prices has taken the headline inflation numbers much beyond RBI's tolerance of about 6% to 7.44%. But the thing is that with food and energy prices, they are highly volatile, and there are policy initiatives which RBI can introduce to control them. So unless and until core inflation remains a problem, the expectation is that the rate pause is likely to continue, and we may not see a rate hike, at least in the subsequent meetings.
All right, no rate hike expected. Of course, that's the big news coming in. Suyash, thanks very much for taking time out. We will keep tracking all those big developments. But staying on with the story of economic corridor, I think you've drawn up a map, Karthik. You've drawn up what could be a tentative map of the new economic corridor. There is a lot of confusion on whether you want to call it a Silk Route, you want to call it a Spice Route. Some are calling it the new Silk Route, because remember the road.
The new Spice Route.
The new, actually, the Road and the Belt Initiative is the old Silk Route. And so some are saying this could be the new Silk. the parlances and
so I think the Silk Route is directly associated with China, and the Spice Route is directly associated with India. So I think
because
the
we're traditionally
initiative
the
could be the new Silk Route, but that Silk Route also seems to have hit certain speed breakers. But now we are talking about this new Spice Route emerging.
This could come off, and this could come off very strongly.
Yeah, I guess. I think, let's just look at it. This is, of course, not a map to scale, but largely what this map really tells us, Shweta, is the fact that you have India, you have the Middle East, and you have Europe.
Right.
Now, Europe, beyond this map, also gives you direct access to the US. But, we are not talking about that route just as yet. We are pretty much talking about India coming up with a partnership with the Middle East and thereby with Europe, keeping these 4 primary countries in account, which are going to be the torchbearers of this new spice route, so to speak, which is coming up, formerly known as the IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe corridor, right? So IMEC, within which we've got this eastern corridor, which is connecting the Middle East on the eastern side to India, India's west coast specifically, going through the Arabian Sea, cutting across right to the Middle East. Which are the prominent countries here? We are talking about UAE, we are talking about Saudi Arabia, and further north we are also talking about Israel. And Israel is a major port city, the Haifa port, also controlled in part measure by Adani ports, becomes a great conduit for trade. And now from here, this trade opens up to the northern side with Europe, and that becomes the northern corridor. So primarily what we are trying to do is that whatever roads that China has built, because China is doesn't have access to the Indian Ocean like India does. So the Belt and Road Initiative, which China has made, actually is a road network cutting across into Europe.
Right.
With India, the disadvantage, or now perhaps the advantage as we see it, is that if India wanted to take a northern route, it would either have to go through China, opening India's borders with China, or go through Pakistan, meaning we are that much more susceptible to any tension between India and China or India and Pakistan impacting trade directly. Now this cutting across through the Arabian Sea all the way into Middle East by a road network, by a rail network, by data network cables, as well as by a hydrogen pipeline is a mammoth project. But once this happens, we don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know which country is going to bear how much burden of that cost. But once we are able to navigate this, literally navigate through these waterways and get into Middle East, it pretty much opens a full new corridor of opportunities, not just for India, as much for India, but not just for India, even for Europe, even for Middle East, to be in the trade vicinity of a emerging superpower like India.
All right, and now that you've put pen to paper, quite literally, it makes it all the more. I'm very excited about the map, I'll be honest with you. You know, when we spoke about this yesterday, perhaps I couldn't draw upon my existing knowledge of geopolitics and geography to understand how this is going to be charted. But let's also understand when that crucial announcement was made by the Prime Minister. I don't know if we have the bite, we'll try and pull it out. But that announcement was immediately followed by US President Joe Biden, who was the second chair in that press conference, talking about the importance of it. I think it's as good for India as it is for the US.
So what is the common problem that India and US are both,
China.
It's China, right? We are both confronted with that common problem called China, and neither of the two economies, US or India, would be very happy with the kind of influence that China is going to unilaterally be able to exert on global trade. And when it comes to global trade, I think it is fairly clear now that after the COVID-induced disruptions, after China's zero COVID policy, and then the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or war or aggression, whatever you want to call it, the UN, the G20 declaration simply evaded it, did not call it anything. But yeah, I mean, I think let's call it conflict. So we've seen these two major landmark events, COVID. COVID-induced zero COVID policy in China, shutting down factories, disrupting manufacturing, disrupting supply chain, and then the Russia-Ukraine war also adding to the already disrupted world order. Right. So in that context, both US and India, like the rest of the world, have realized that too much unilateralism on account of one manufacturing hub of the world called China is a problem. Too much trade where China becomes the conduit and networks go to and from China and the SAR region is a problem for global trade to flourish.
Absolutely.
And in this new context, I think US is as much a stakeholder as excited about this new trade route called this IMEC emerging, so that you are not really restricted for any free flow of goods, services, including data and essentials like hydrogen to freely flow between continents and between countries.
So, US has an important stake there, and you briefly mentioned I2U2. So for the benefit of our viewers who don't understand what I2U2 is, there are two I's, there are two
I's
U's,
and two U's, India, Israel,
right,
UAE, US.
And we're talking about a partnership that would benefit all of these countries.
So from what I understand, the I2U2 is taking the lead in making the investments into building this infrastructure.
Right.
So from my limited understanding right now, I think more details are going to emerge every day. What I understand right now, Shweta, is that these 4 countries are going to invest in creating this infrastructure. Of course, there is going to be certain infrastructure to be built in Saudi Arabia as well.
Right.
Right. But Saudi Arabia being, does not have a sea route directly connected like India does, UAE does, US, the entire Atlantic Ocean connecting it to Europe. So these are countries which will, Israel, the Haifa port, making the gateway into Europe. So, these are 4 countries which have a coastal, line, have a coastal sort of geography, and whatever coastal infrastructure needs to be developed, the heavy lifting of that is going to be done by these 4 countries. And then you will, of course, have a Saudi Arabia also in between, where the rail network, the road network, etc. There is going to be hopefully some investment coming in from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who was live right now at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and his country.
Okay, and before we move on from this story, I think it's also important to mention the Belt and Road Initiative, because that's where Italy is saying it finds itself a bit trapped, perhaps could be moving away from it. That's the indication that's coming so far.
So I think if we can pull up that map again, Shweta, I think it'll be interesting to try and understand what this Belt and Road Initiative and China sort of inroads into Europe could eventually look like. So again, I mean, we've got pretty much the same map, and if you look at the geography, you've got India right here, and then from China, if you see, cutting across all the way through Afghanistan / Pakistan, depending the trajectory, and getting a direct access into Europe through these Eastern European countries like Azerbaijan, etc., is a simple road / rail network.
Right.
There is no sea, there is no ocean involved.
It's all landlocked.
So China's Belt and Road Initiative, I mean, China is not landlocked because it also has, part of the Pacific Ocean on the other side. But on the western side, the western part of China connecting to Europe becomes a simple road / rail network. It doesn't entail ports. So China's aggression into building this network, back then when it started this initiative, of course, China was the darling of the world because everything was pretty much made in China. But then we saw how the world got distracted and disrupted when the zero COVID policy hit China. And whatever we are seeing today by way of inflation, by way of supply chain hampering, etc., it's all because China had shut down completely. And the world, including Europe, including its its thick friends, partners like Spain and Italy, realizing that that there is a major disruption happening in their lives because the supply chain is disrupted. And hence there is more value perhaps now being seen even with Italy, Spain, France, and these other European major economies, that India can definitely not be ignored, and hence there is greater need to have some sort of a convergence and perhaps some investment when it comes to developing an alternate route for commerce.
Come to think of it, there's a lot of geopolitics involved here in this economic corridor, and a lot of geopolitics also likely to play up as far as setting up this corridor is concerned. There's no timeline just as yet. We discussed this, no promise of when it's going to happen, but when and if it happens, this is going to be a major game changer for both services and goods to be transported from US, Europe, Middle East to India and vice versa. We'll track these events closely here. But moving on to another important development that's also come in by the way of G20, I'll also request my colleague Amit Ranjan to walk in and perhaps, weigh in on what's going to happen on cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies, essentially, we know now that G20 has decided to adopt the synthesis paper from IMF FSB, suggesting that you shouldn't be banning cryptocurrencies. Banning is not going to be the way forward. Some sort of regulation perhaps is in the offing.
Yes, and the paper that was suggested, all the G20 nations on the sidelines agreed to what was on that paper. India, while agreeing to it, will be analyzing all the recommendations made by the Financial Stability Board and the IMF, and it will take a few months to decide its own course. One of the big things that has been suggested on this paper is that each nation develop its own financial action task force, FATFs, on the regulation of unbacked crypto assets. Now, what are unbacked crypto assets? Are those that have no, that don't rest their value on crude or gold or anything. They are just for speculation, and these are the old ones. The case 2 points, the most popular one, Bitcoin, is an unbacked asset. So these are the ones that need to be regulated. India, taking on the task, taking on the mantle of being the voice of the global South, the synthesis paper also suggested that the most vulnerable nations to money laundering through these crypto assets and through terror financing and narcotics are the global South nations, are the developing nations. So that is where things stand. India, the good thing is all the nations have agreed in principle. How they will go about it, how the regulations will come on these unbacked crypto assets, India will take a few months to analyze and take its course.
All right, and it's an important mention of the FATF, because so far what we've been reading, what's been coming out in headlines is that crypto, there's an agreement on having some sort of regulation or a template rather, which is the exact word that Finance Minister used while explaining what could be in offing, and this all discussion will take place in the new meeting, the meeting that is likely to continue of the Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors in Morocco, in Marrakesh, whenever that happens in October perhaps. But I think what's going to come out is that, you know, cryptos need to be regulated also to hamper, to put a stop to, you know, terror financing, because terror financing usually happening through cryptos has also been identified is a problem in the synthesis paper, Karthik.
So I think, you know, very simply put, there's a great possibility, potential of cryptocurrency being used to fund illegal activities. Terror financing could be one of them, right? Because of the very nature of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain that protects every transaction and records in a distributed ledger system every single transaction, I think it is not possible right now for any government or any individual to say that yes, crypto has financed terror or crypto has indulged in narcotics or whatever. These are threats of or, you know, risks of an unregulated transaction financial instrument like crypto, right? But let's narrow focus on what the G20 nations have agreed upon and what are still some of the open areas. I think what has definitely been agreed upon is that there is no blanket ban on cryptocurrencies, right? So cryptocurrency has not been banned. Cryptocurrency continues to exist, right? No nation has banned cryptocurrencies. The second thing is that cryptocurrency will not be used as legal tender. Cryptocurrency will not be used like cash is used, or a credit card, or like we say UPI is used to make direct purchases as a substitute to cash or cash denominated instruments. So cryptocurrency is not going to be a monetary asset, right? And the third thing is that every country has decided, by signing the New Delhi Declaration and adopting it in their charter, is that there is going to be some thought and some mind put into regulating cryptocurrencies. What has, however, not been agreed upon yet, perhaps not even proposed yet, is who regulates cryptocurrency. Is it the job of the central bank? Is it the job of the stock market regulator? Or is it the job of the Ministry of Finance? Or is it the job of, let's say, the Ministry of IT, technology? So, you know, we really don't know yet, you know, what is
which
the
part
mechanism
of the government will do it,
and which part of the government and which class of an asset would you call it?
Right.
It is definitely at the cusp of technology. It is definitely at the cusp of being a financial asset because its value goes up and down. And as the case may be, it is also in some countries being used as a transaction tool where you can, let's say, you know, give a cryptocurrency to buy a tangible or non-tangible asset. I mean, a few years ago, even Elon Musk was saying that he's going to let people buy the Tesla car using Bitcoin, right? So,
My understanding is, so since it's a matter of financial mandate, it's going to be regulated, and this is purely on the basis of what I've understood that's come out so far. It's going to be managed by both the finance ministry as well as the central bank governors of countries which are going to sign up. But important to point out, if an FATF is going to be set up within each country, they're all going to monitor the use of this cryptocurrency. I mean, it's not going to be a legal tender, which is so far clear. So you can't use it to buy a good or buy a service. But if you are in case using it at all, you are going to be monitored very, very closely.
And probably penalized. The people who are violating the that clause of the law of the land, that it is being used. There was talk sometimes that cryptocurrency will be extended to buying your tickets or land or like Tesla cars. So that will have to be halted. And again, there will be a differentiation between unbacked crypto assets and backed crypto assets. Unbacked crypto assets.
What's the difference between the two?
Unbacked crypto assets are the oldest ones, like Bitcoin. Nobody knows where it started from. Nobody knows why every 4 years it is halved. Okay.
The value of it.
The value of it. It is halved. It is whether it's controlled by people. So even when you are regulating it and you have to penalize somebody, who do you penalize? The regulated the backed crypto assets back their value on, say, things like gold, crude or whatever. So they are a little safer. So that differentiation will be, the Financial Action Task Force basically will first look at that differentiation, isolate the ones that are more vulnerable to terror financing or narcotics or things of that sort, and then probably go out about their laws. It's going to be the laws too. The monitoring too will have to have a lot of algorithms and those
tech
sorts
influence.
of tech influence into it.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a process.
You know, when you talk about not safe, non-bagged, I'm reminded of the Dogecoin. With that dog photo, which again Elon Musk is responsible for promoting how? I mean, to the point where he changed his own photograph and he said, I bought so many crypto assets, I've bought Dogecoin, prices went up.
You remember that one day when the Twitter logo
was
also,
changed.
before
Yes,
it became
became
X,
dog.
was
Became
replaced by the Dogecoin logo.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very, heartening there, at least as far as crypto regulations or a roadmap for crypto regulations is concerned. But another important endorsement of G20 nations was the CBDC or eRupee. RBI is also in fact pushing for eRupee like never before.
Yeah. So the pilot for the call money market use of CBDC is likely to be put out there before August or by August. That's the indication.
I think.
By October, sorry. August is past. by October. The call money markets are markets where interbank transfers happen between financial institutions at interbank rates. The interest that is charged is the interest that banks pay when they lend and borrow money from each other. And these are short-term transactions, the call money market. So a pilot for the call money market is going to be launched by October this year. Pilots for the wholesale markets, that the EW was launched in November last year, and for the retail market ER was launched a month later in December last year, and those have been successful. They are still on. So we are moving from the story of crypto to eRupee and the CBDC, which probably in one way could counter crypto.
All right, so somebody who does not really understand what is a call market, what does it really mean, what is RBI doing, break it down for us, Karthik. People like me who have perhaps no idea of what you're saying.
I think, call market is basically when a bank is lending to another bank. You're taking, something in a great B2B context. It's the call market. But I think what is important here, let's understand it in the context of, let's say, wholesale versus retail, right? Now, retail usage is when you go to the market and you want to buy something, you, instead of paying 100 rupees cash, you transfer from your CBDC wallet or a wallet which supports CBDC, you transfer a 100 rupee eRupee token to make that transaction, right? So that is the retail usage. That retail usage has also run its few pilots, very small quantum of pilot exercises. But what is really likely to happen first is the whole wholesale use of eRupee, which means that if if a bank owes another bank or needs to transfer another bank, let's say 500,000 rupees, right? Those 500,000 rupees, instead of them being a wire transfer, would now start becoming an eRupee wholesale transfer, right? Or when the RBI liquidates banks using the repo rate mechanism, right? Or when banks send the money back to RBI using the CRR, the cash reserve ratio. So any bank to bank transfer would first get initiated using the wholesale version of eRupee, and thereby making banks understand and become familiar with this whole eRupee ecosystem, the concept, and thereby I think the eRupee retail would be an easier rollout, that if banks have enough eRupees stashed in their deposits, right, or in their reserves, then anytime a customer comes and wants to withdraw cash, perhaps customers could also be enticed to use part cash, part eRupee. So let's say you want to withdraw 50,000 rupees, you take maybe 25,000 rupees in cash, and 25,000 rupees of eRupee gets transferred to your wallet. So, you know, maybe like this, the whole use case is going to build. But what I still don't understand is what is going to eventually come out of it, because I think the UPI does the job very well. We'll try and understand in
the next 5 to 6 hours before we come back to you with the next bulletin on what eRupee push means. But I have to be honest, until I feel it in my hand, it does not count. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of people, to you know, simply replace your physical note with
As I understand, it's going to be like a sticker, right? It's going to be like you've got 500 rupee stickers that is 500 rupees. You can't feel it. You can't feel UPI, right?
You scroll it on your screen.
So you swipe one off. To me, I get those 100 rupees. You're left with 4 stickers. I get one of your 100 rupee stickers.
Brilliant. And so we will try and understand the utility of the RBI's new push, perhaps by 4 p.m. This afternoon. But that's all we have in this bulletin. Thank you very much for watching.
मैं इमरान अहमद खान नियाजी सबके दिल से हल्फ उठाता हूँ.
When Imran Khan came initially into politics, he thought his personal popularity would be sufficient for him. It didn't happen.
The retired military generals are openly saying that Imran Khan is a better choice.
Imran Khan may have bitten a bit too much, more than what he can chew.
Implosion. This and more. Streaming on world's first news OTT. News 9 Plus. Download now.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
The historical moment, and it's here. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, loses to 16-year-old Pragnananda.
The beauty of sports is the emergence of new heroes and the triumph of the underdog. Chennai teenager R. Pragnananda too finds himself in that bracket. Having made heads turn in the chess world with his achievements, the 16-year-old prodigy seems to have made a habit of vanquishing world champion Magnus Carlsen every time they square off. The Chennai boy has been able to get the better of Carlsen twice in 3 months, a feat which other higher-ranked players have not been able to achieve. Pragnananda is riding a crest, and chess may seem a renewed interest in the sport in the country. The popularity of chess in India is down to one man, Vishwanathan Anand. His laurels have put India on the world chess map, and Pragnananda too is hoping he can reach those exalted heights. Chess is to Chennai what cricket is to Mumbai and football is to Kolkata. Pragnananda comes from a state known for its love for the game. And his meteoric rise is a testament to the dedication and passion he has displayed from a very tender age.
My sister started to play chess at the age of 6. Back then I was 2, and then I started to watch her play at home. Yeah, that's how it started. I used to go and knock her pieces off when she's practicing. My parents got me a chessboard. I didn't really go to that kind of school life because from start it was just chess. First standard I started to go to tournaments very seriously. I started to come top 2 in the nationals. Chess in India is basically because of Anand sir. Yeah, he started everything. When I started to play chess, he was the world champion at that point. So he definitely had a huge impact on me. I think Olympiad is right move because a lot of people will now follow and take chess seriously. I think Olympiad happening in India is a great thing, and that too in Chennai is, we're just very proud of it. There's so many, like around 2,000 people will come to Chennai and play Olympiad.
From having only 3 grandmasters in the 90s in India to a whopping 73 grandmasters in 2022, the game has witnessed a stratospheric rise in acceptance in the past decade.
Primary reason is, I think, a lot of investment done by the parents, because see, we don't have a system of training in this country. Let's face it. So a lot of private initiative. Parents who are resourceful are helping their kids go out and play. Some manage to get sponsorship for their children, and a lot of foreign coaching under some good grandmasters. Not necessarily overseas, but Indians do have a few grandmasters who have now turned to coaching, like R.B. Ramesh or Praveen Thipse, and there are so many of them, Swapnil Thopade and so on and so forth. Now they have taken up coaching, and that has been the biggest reason for Indians getting quality coaching, and now they know the way to approach the grandmaster's title.
Staying grounded is how Pragnananda and his family feel is the best way to tackle fame and success.
வைஷாலி பிரக்யா அவங்களே மேனேஜ் பண்ணிக்கிட்டாங்க. சின்ன வயசுலேயே செஸ்ஸும் ஸ்டடீஸும் மேனேஜ் பண்ணி அவங்களே ஒர்க் ஹார்ட் அவங்களே பண்ணுவாங்க. நான் பேக்கில் ஒரு சின்ன சப்போர்ட் தான். அவங்களே மேனேஜ் பண்ணி அவங்களே கிளாஸ்க்கு போகிறது, ஒர்க் பண்ணுறது, இன்ட்ரெஸ்டாக எல்லாமே 2 பேரும் பண்ணுவாங்க.
When sporting activities were hit hard due to the COVID-19 pandemic, chess was one sport which kept ticking. Thanks to technology, as online tournaments kept players busy, and there has been a spurt in the number of online chess events during this coronavirus-forced lockdown.
Yeah, chess didn't get affected by pandemic because we can just sit with the laptop and play online. It was difficult because there was no board events, but it was not so much bad compared to other sports as they couldn't practice even.
Just find some way to start the game from the point. In chess, one good thing is like we can have young champions. In other sports, usually they're like Sachin Tendulkar or Virat Kohli, they're only in their 20s or so. But in chess, it is possible to have heroes as young as a 10-year-old child. So that is one good thing. It can attract the young minds easily.
with Chennai set to host the 44th Chess Olympiad in July, the interest in the board game is likely to spike further.
One major event that has not happened is the World Chess Olympiad, because it's huge. We'll have 5 men players and 5 women players from every country, and around 190 countries will be participating. But I'm really happy that it is coming to Chennai.
While chess has witnessed a massive resurgence in the last decade, there's ample room for improvement in the country, where chess originated 14 centuries ago.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The Warship Killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
एक खुशखबरी मिली है। हमारी टीम्स के हार्डवर्क से और आप सभी के सहयोग से नई दिल्ली G20 लीडर्स समिट डिक्लेरेशन पर सहमति बनी है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि इस लीडर्स डिक्लेरेशन को भी एडॉप्ट किया जाए। मैं इस डिक्लेरेशन को एडॉप्ट करने की घोषणा करता हूं। इस अवसर पर मैं हमारे मंत्रीगण, शेरपा और सभी अधिकारियों का हृदय से अभिनंदन करता हूं, जिन्होंने अथाक परिश्रम करके इसे सार्थक किया है और इसलिए वे सभी अभिनंदन के अधिकारी हैं।
The summit has adopted the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration. The message of our presidency, as you are all aware, is that we are one earth, one family, and we share one future. This draws the entire proceedings of the New Delhi Summit are in fact organized accordingly, with 3 sessions devoted to each aspect of this theme. Now, reflecting this approach, we have consciously sought to make this G20 as inclusive and broad-based as possible. It is witnessing the participation of its 20 member states, 9 invitee nations, and 14 international organizations. It is a matter of particular satisfaction for us that the African Union has this morning become a permanent member of the G20, that too during the Indian presidency. This is in keeping with the priority that we attach to addressing the urgent concerns of the Global South. You would recall that at the beginning of our presidency, at Prime Minister Modi's initiative, 125 nations were consulted to express the voice of the Global South. In terms of its organization and program, the Indian presidency, if I may say so, has been exceptional. Events have been spread across 60 cities, which are truly across the length and breadth of India. There has been a popular participation and a societal involvement of an extraordinary degree. The interest in G20 proceedings have been particularly strong among our youth. It has been an opportunity to showcase our culture, traditions and heritage as well. The G20 has contributed to making India world ready and the world India ready. The declaration that the leaders have agreed on today focuses on promoting strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth. It seeks to accelerate progress on SDGs and has come up with an action plan accordingly. It envisages a Green Development Pact for a sustainable future. It endorses high-level principles on lifestyle for sustainable development, voluntary principles on hydrogen, the Chennai Principles for a Sustainable and Resilient Blue Economy, and the Deccan Principles on food security and nutrition, among others. The transformative and inclusive role of technology has been highlighted with a focus on digital public infrastructure. The Indian Presidency's proposal of a One Future Alliance has also been noted. The G20 has reaffirmed the fundamental importance of gender equality and committed to halve the digital gender gap by 2030.
So today we are in a position to adopt, through the finance track, people-centric, action-oriented and far-sighted approach, and as a result of which several outcomes of the finance track will certainly reflect these objectives with which we started the negotiations. It has been very clear in our mind that we should ensure that no one is left behind in our pursuit of global solutions. So we have endeavored to support countries, especially those from the global south, to be an integral part of the global decision-making process. The G20, as you all know, is a very diverse group. Each country is at different milestones of economic development, and their trajectory is also very different in achieving their developmental goals. So through well-curated debates and careful assimilation of all the perspectives, the Indian Presidency has crafted solutions that resonate with each member, offering a shared path forward for all. Many action-oriented outcomes of this presidency contain comprehensive strategies that cater to the unique needs and aspirations of all developing nations. We assumed the presidency at a challenging time of geopolitical tension. The Indian presidency has worked to ensure that these divergences don't overshadow the core developmental outcomes or concerns of the global community that demand collaborative solutions. So today, as I look back at the 10 months of Indian presidency, I am left with gratitude and satisfaction. I can confidently state that the Indian G20 presidency has walked the talk. Now, let me share with you just some of the key achievements of the Indian presidency, the finance track. First one is the outcomes which are focused on strengthening the MDBs to address shared global challenges of the 21st century. So under this strengthening MDBs, there are 4 key highlights that I'd like to bring to your notice. The first one is agreement on the need for a better, bigger and more effective MDBs. It is so necessary to have better, bigger and more effective MDBs because the developmental demands from all across the globe is so high, these institutions will have to be better and bigger. This is also going to contribute to enhancing representation and voice of developing countries in the decision making. The second under the MDBs, strengthening of MDBs, is the G20 Independent Expert Group on strengthening MDBs, and this was established, and it has submitted its volume 1. The first report, their report consists of 2 volumes. The first volume has already been submitted. The report recommends a triple agenda that dovetails with the call for the bigger, better and more effective MDBs.
India's presidency, the Prime Minister had said that India's presidency must be inclusive, it must be decisive, it must be ambitious, and it must be action-oriented. The New Delhi Leaders' Declaration has 83 paras in all. All 83 paras have 100% consensus across all countries. There are 8 paras on the geopolitical issue, which is entitled Planet, People, Peace and Prosperity. All those 8 paras have 100% acceptance. All countries have unanimously supported the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. This is one declaration without a single footnote and without any chair's summary. This is a complete statement with 100% unanimity. This demonstrates both the Prime Minister's and India's great ability to bring all developing countries, all emerging markets, all developed countries, China, Russia, everybody together on the same table and bring consensus. Secondly, this has been the most ambitious presidency in G20's history ever, because the number of outcomes it has, both the outcomes and the annexed documents, are about 112, which is more than 2.5 times which has ever been achieved before. Thirdly, this presidency, if you go through the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, it has a huge India narrative, it has a huge India footprint, whether you look at the Deccan high-level principles on food security, whether you look at the Chennai high-level principles for blue ocean economy, whether you look at the Goa roadmap for tourism, whether you look at the Gandhinagar implementation roadmap for land restoration, or Jaipur call for enhanced MSMEs, all this will leave a huge footprint of India in G20.
The G20 Summit is underway, and the big talking point has been the permanent inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. And we have with us Mr. Vincent Magwanya, who is the spokesperson of the President of South Africa. Sir, your first reaction, how important and significant is this development? Is this something that you were seeking continuously? And what kind of an impact will this have for the South Africa, of course, but also for the African Union?
Well, it's a very significant development, one that we have been advocating for quite some time. As you know, we did step up that advocacy last year in Bali during the G20 Summit. We continued in various bilateral interactions with G20 members to advocate for the AU's inclusion into the G20. We are delighted that it has finally happened. We are grateful at the leadership that Prime Minister Modi and the Republic of India has demonstrated in this regard. This summit has been largely characterized by the efforts to bring into the G20 the voice of the Global South and to ensure much higher levels of inclusion than we've ever seen before. And so it's an important development that means a lot for the continent. It was never going to be sustainable to have a continent of more than 1.4 billion people excluded from this premier forum for international economic cooperation.
Well, you mentioned Global South, and this is a term that Indian Prime Minister Modi and Foreign Minister Jaishankar has been using continuously over the last 1 year. We've seen the emergence of this term many decades ago, but in the last 1 year, significantly this has been used continuously. Do you think this is a term that West tends to ignore a lot, and do you think the emergence of the Global South means something at a time when we have turbulent times and Third World was ignored completely? And now Global South is something that is emerging and cannot be ignored?
Well, over the past 20, 30 years or so, we've seen quite a strong emergence of the Chinese economy, the Indian economy, the Brazilian economy, and many others from the global south that have emerged to be quite strong economies. Alongside that, we've seen an increase in the voices of those countries, and we've seen an increase in the voices of the global south seeking more representativity and more inclusion in various global multilateral platforms. And so it's a very important development. There is recognition globally that you cannot chart an agenda for the world or a direction for the world that excludes large parts of the world, whether you're dealing with climate change or you're dealing with security issues. And so we're seeing the world coming together a lot more to tackle the various challenges that we are facing. Is there more work still to be done? Absolutely, there's still a lot of work, but there's finally that recognition. A couple of months ago, President Macron hosted an international conference on global financing. And again, similar sentiments were expressed about the ongoing need to include those voices that were excluded in the past, to reform global multilateral financial development institutions. And so we're going to see an enhancement of those processes, and that also includes the United Nations Security Council, which is long overdue for reform. The BRICS Summit declared that that's one of the commitments that BRICS members made, that we need to advance our advocacy for the reform of the United Nations Security Council. So this step to have the AU included in the G20 marks the beginning of a process that we would like to see, where the global south is included, where Africa is included, where these institutions reflect the sort of broader sentiments of the world rather than being exclusive in one way or the other.
One last question. You know, there hasn't been any consensus on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and at G20, India's endeavor has been for a peaceful resolution to the conflict, for talks to actually begin between the two countries. But also, in the last G20, Prime Minister Modi mentioned that this is not an era of war. Do you think there will be a consensus this time around tomorrow when the New Delhi declaration or the final communique comes out? And will the communique actually come out? What do you believe?
There were similar sentiments of concern that were expressed at the beginning of the summit in Bali last year. And ultimately, we ended with a text that reflected the broader sort of sentiments of the summit. We are reasonably confident that the same will happen here. India has put in a lot of commendable effort into not only the organization of the summit, but to a successful outcome of this summit. And we don't think that just that issue alone will undermine that effort. We think there will be some consensus reached. One of the differences that we have this year, which we did not have last year, is that we have a formal peace process that's aimed at resolving that conflict peacefully. It is a very complex and intractable conflict that we are confident nonetheless that will be resolved. All wars, as President Ramaphosa always say, have to ultimately come to an end, and when they do, it involves both parties in some form of dialogue. And so this year you have a peace process which you did not have last year, and that peace process has the support of all G20 members. That peace process, particularly the African Peace Initiative, has been discussed with leaders from across the world. President Modi was well briefed about it. President of China was well briefed about it, including the sort of heads of states from G7 countries. And so that development on its own should make some kind of difference in terms of how this summit approaches its wording or declaration with respect to that conflict.
Well, let's hope there is a consensus. Thank you very much for
joining
us. G20 Summit in New Delhi, which has been termed as a massive success, has finally concluded. Over the last 2 days here at the Bharat Mandapam, there were hectic negotiations. This is actually the epicenter of hectic negotiations between diplomats and heads of the states and heads of delegations about how a consensus could be actually achieved. For days and months together, the international media and foreign policy analysts and wonks had predicted that they will in fact, not have a consensus here at the G20 summit. But clearly, there was a surprising moment when Prime Minister Narendra Modi appeared on the screen and said that he had a good news to share. There was a 37-page document called the New Delhi Declaration that was in fact the consensus document that also included consensus on Ukraine. While Russia was not categorically mentioned there, but it did condemn any kind of violence and war. Clearly, the G20 in New Delhi has been not just a success, but India has been able to include African Union as a permanent member of the G20. Also, India has emerged as a leader of the Global South, but not only Global South, but also a leader of the voiceless around the globe. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has now passed on the baton of the presidency of G20 to Brazil. But before that, the presidency of India will continue till December. So in his concluding remarks, he has said that India would be hosting yet another virtual global leaders summit of the G20 in the month of November. India certainly is making big power push at the G20 summit and clearly reflecting a new India, a new wave of foreign policy, a realignment of sorts, and with several multilaterals on the sidelines of the G20. Certainly here from Bharat Mandapam, the G20 has been a massive success, not just for Modi and Jai Shankar, but for the entire country. And top diplomats in the country say that this is Modi ka magic in combination with Modi ki guarantee. Reporting from Bharat Mandapam, the venue for G20 in New Delhi, this is Aditya Raj Kaul with video journalist Govind.
Excellencies, इस स्पेशल इवेंट में आप सबका हार्दिक स्वागत है। मेरे मित्र राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन के साथ इस इवेंट को को-चेयर करते हुए मुझे हार्दिक खुशी हो रही है। आज हम सब ने एक महत्वपूर्ण और ऐतिहासिक समझौता संपन्न होते हुए देखा है। आने वाले समय में यह भारत, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन का प्रभावी माध्यम होगा। यह पूरे विश्व में कनेक्टिविटी और विकास को सस्टेनेबल दिशा प्रदान करेगा। मैं हिज एक्सेलेंसी राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन, हिज रॉयल हाइनेस क्राउन प्रिंस एंड प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोहम्मद बिन सलमान, हिज रॉयल हाइनेस राष्ट्रपति शेख मोहम्मद बिन जायद, हिज एक्सेलेंसी राष्ट्रपति मैक्रो, हिज एक्सेलेंसी चांसलर सोल्च, हर एक्सेलेंसी प्रधानमंत्री मेलोनी और हर एक्सेलेंसी प्रेसिडेंट वॉन डेर लेयन, इन सबको इस इनिशिएटिव के लिए मैं बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर मानव सभ्यता के विकास का मूल आधार है। भारत ने अपनी विकास यात्रा में इस विषय को सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता दी है। फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के साथ साथ सोशल, डिजिटल तथा फाइनेंशियल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में अभूतपूर्व पैमाने पर निवेश हो रहा है। इससे हम एक विकसित भारत की मजबूत नींव रख रहे हैं। हमने ग्लोबल साउथ के अनेक देशों में एक विश्वसनीय पार्टनर के रूप में एनर्जी, रेलवे, वाटर, टेक्नोलॉजी पार्क्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स इंप्लीमेंट किए हैं। इन प्रयासों में हमने डिमांड ड्रिवन और ट्रांसपेरेंट अप्रोच पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया है। पीजीआईआई के माध्यम से हम ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गैप को कम करने में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, भारत कनेक्टिविटी को क्षेत्रीय सीमाओं में नहीं मापता। सभी क्षेत्रों के साथ कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ाना भारत की मुख्य प्राथमिकता है। हमारा मानना है कि कनेक्टिविटी विभिन्न देशों के बीच आपसी व्यापार ही नहीं, आपसी विश्वास भी बढ़ाने का स्रोत है। कनेक्टिविटी इनिशिएटिव्स को प्रमोट करते हुए कुछ मूलभूत सिद्धांतों का सुनिश्चित किया जाना महत्वपूर्ण है, जैसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय नॉर्म्स, रूल्स तथा लॉज का पालन, सभी देशों की संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान, डेट बर्डन की जगह फाइनेंशियल वायबिलिटी को बढ़ावा देना और पर्यावरण के सभी मापदंडों का पालन करना। आज जब हम कनेक्टिविटी का इतना बड़ा इनिशिएटिव ले रहे हैं, तब हम आने वाली पीढ़ियों के सपनों के विस्तार के बीज बो रहे हैं। मैं इस ऐतिहासिक अवसर पर सभी लीडर्स को मैं बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Gentlemen, thank you, all my colleagues. This is, someone once said in a similar domestic action that was positive, this is a big deal. This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 Summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And this afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality. Economic corridors. You're going to hear that phrase more than once, I expect, over the next decade. Economic corridors. As we work to address infrastructure gaps across low and middle income countries, we need to maximize the impacts of our investments. That's why a few months ago I announced that the United States will work with our partners to invest in economic corridors. In practice, it means we're focusing on regional infrastructure projects that deliver results across multiple countries and in multiple sectors. And today I'm proud to announce that we've finalized the historic agreement for a new India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. As a key part of this corridor, we're going to invest in ships and rail that extends from India all the way to Europe, connected by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. Bridging ports across two continents, unlocking endless opportunities, including making it far easier to trade, export clean energy, expand access to reliable, clean electricity, lay cables that will connect communities and secure a stable internet, contributing to a more stable, more prosperous, and integrated Middle East. And I want to thank the sponsors. And I particularly want to thank Prime Minister Modi and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and President von der Leyen and the European Commissions. And since he's not speaking today, I wanted to, well, maybe he is speaking today. I had a note he wasn't speaking. At any rate, I'm going to stop there. In the sub-Saharan Africa, we're working in a private-public partnership as well to invest in a trans-African corridor. That includes a new partner, the European Union. President von der Leyen, thank you for making this very possible. Together, as part of this corridor, we're going to invest in a new rail line that will extend from the western port in Angola to the DRC, to Zambia, and ultimately the Indian Ocean. It's a project that's about far from just laying tracks. It's about creating jobs, increasing trade, strengthening supply chains, boosting connectivity, laying foundations that will strengthen commerce and food security for people across multiple countries. This is a game-changing regional investment, and both of these are huge steps forward. But they're far from the only ones. We're continuing to make big investments in infrastructure around the world. That includes a solar energy site, an insulin manufacturing facility, and electricity project right here in India. We're continuing to develop economic corridors across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And together with our partners, we're working to mobilize the trillions of investment needed to close infrastructure gaps around the world, including the formation of a new investor forum that the United States will host in a couple weeks. Let me close with this. The world stands at an inflection point in history, a point where decisions we make today are going to affect the course of our future, all of our futures for decades to come. A point where our investments are more critical than ever. So together, let's continue to work as one to seize this moment in history and maximize our collective investments, to find new partners, to unlock new capital, because when we invest in low and middle income countries, all countries benefit. When we invest in emerging economies, all economies benefit. And when we invest in the future of people anywhere, people everywhere benefit. So I want to thank you again for being here. I look forward to working with all of you, and I'm going to turn it back to the Prime Minister. Thank you.
In conclusion, I'd like to commend the PGII launched by President Biden with the participation of Saudi Arabia in $20 billion. We look forward to the integration of the initiative and the Economic Corridor project, which is announced in this meeting. I would like to thank those who worked with us to reach this founding step to establish this important economic corridor. My best regard to you all.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, it's been 2 years since we launched PGII, a joint vision by the world's leading economies to invest in the infrastructure that low and middle income countries need. And 2 years on, more large-scale projects are seeing the light, and we are presenting two of them today. First, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This is nothing but historic. It will be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf, and Europe, with a rail link that will make trade between India and Europe 40% faster, with an electricity cable and a clean hydrogen pipeline to foster clean energy trade between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, with a high-speed data cable to link some of the most innovative digital ecosystems in the world and create business opportunities all along the way. These are state-of-the-art connections for the world of tomorrow, faster, shorter, cleaner. This corridor is much more than just a railway or a cable. It is a green and digital bridge across continents and civilizations. And this is also the spirit of the second project we announced today, the Trans-African Corridor, which will connect the port of Lobito in Angola with the Katanga province in DRC and the Copper Belt in Zambia. Our goal is not only to connect a landlocked region to the sea. Our partnership will also invest in local value chains, in clean energy, and in skills for the local workforce. This is the spirit of PGII. It is a whole new approach to large infrastructure investment. It is about shared prosperity. It is about real benefits for all partners. Thank you.
Prime Minister Modi for organizing this meeting and President Biden